Today we're having a look at the Ulanzi NP-F battery plate. It comes in this plain cardboard box. There's nothing inside it besides the battery plate itself and a very short manual in both Chinese and English. There's not much information in the manual besides the input and output voltages for the 4 ports that this plate has. The battery plate itself is made completely out of plastic. It has a 1/4" 20 standard screw. The screw can be removed and the battery plate can be attached to a standard tripod quick release plate. On the bottom we have the mounting hole and the array locating pins, and 2 additional holes in case you're mounting it to something that has those locating pins. On the top we have the power button and the charge indicator. On the left side we have the Type-C out port and the DC 8-volt out port. The DC out port is directly connected to the battery, so whatever the voltage the battery is outputting is going to be available through this port. There's not much information about the port in the manual, so this is how it functions. I'm not sure if it's regulated or whatnot. If you're interested in powering your equipment through DC, I think there are much better battery plates available. I got this because I wanted to power my equipment through USB. There's nothing on the bottom of the battery plate, and on the right side there's a USB-C power delivery in and out port and USB-A out. So the interesting part about the USB-A out port is when it is plugged in, both this port and Type-C out port will drop down to 5 volts because they share the same power regulator. And on the front side we see the battery terminals and the battery release lever. An interesting thing about this specific battery plate, and one of the reasons that I got it, is that it supports 45 watts out through USB-C PD port. Of course, it cannot support 45 watts on every port at the same time, and it supports 45 watts total, but it's still a useful feature if you have some devices that require higher current. Other than that, the maximum power out it supports is 45 watts on the USB-C PD port, 18 watts on the USB-A out port, and again 45 watts on the Type-C out port. My original idea of getting a battery plate with 3 USB ports was to power my camera, which is ZV-E10 Mark I, a fan attached to the camera, which is Ulanzi CU01, and a potential future monitor through USB-C. Currently, I don't have an external monitor, so I'm going to simulate a third device using this Ulanzi VL49 LED light. Now, this particular light is broken because the battery that it came with swelled, and I had to disassemble and desolder it. So at the moment it cannot be powered internally. And that's why it's going to be a perfect device to demonstrate the stability of the power delivery through USB. Oh, and I don't recommend getting these lights for those reasons. I'm going to be using ZV-10 that has an internal battery, however has a USB-C cable connected to the battery plate. That way, even if the battery plate has no battery, the camera can still be powered on. The camera fan is going to be powered through USB-C as well. ZV-10 is connected to the USB-C out port, and the fan is connected to USB-C PD out port. For power, I'm going to be using small rig 4469 NP-F F970 battery. This battery can be charged through USB-C. Right now we have the camera running on the internal battery, and the fan has no power, so it can be turned on. I'm going to insert the NP-F battery. Now the camera is powered externally and the fan can be turned on. Let's see what happens if I don't turn on the fan. If a device connected to USB port is not drawing enough power for a certain period of time, the USB port becomes inactive. So now the fan has no power and it cannot be turned on anymore. This is the main issue with this battery plate. To get this fan to run again, I have to replug the USB cable. Notice what happens to the camera power while I do this. The camera momentarily loses power. I assume all ports share some kind of power regulation circuit, and whenever a new device is plugged in, power needs to be renegotiated for all ports. Using two devices connected to USB-C ports is pretty much the happy path for this battery plate. Every other scenario has some kind of issues. As you see, again, the fan lost power because it was not drawing enough current and the port is disabled now. Let's try to replug the battery and see what happens. Now the camera is running on the internal battery, and let's plug it back in. The camera is running now on the external power, and the fan has power, so it can be turned on. Now let's plug in the third device. And again, the camera had to renegotiate the power and delivery, so it was momentarily running on its internal power. The issue with this is if you have devices connected that don't have an internal battery, whenever you're plugging or unplugging something, they will all lose power and reboot. So in case you had a dummy battery connected to a USB-C port, if you connected something new or you replugged some cable, the camera would lose power, and if it was recording on the time, you could potentially lose or corrupt your footage. And by the way, the same thing happened with the light as was happening before with the fan. It was not drawing enough current through the USB port and the port got disabled. So now both the fan and the light cannot be powered on. And to power them back on again, I would either need to replug the cables. So now the fan can be powered on. And now the light can be powered on, but now the fan has reset, because each time I replug the cables, all devices get disconnected. Alright, so now we have all the devices connected and the light is working because I have it turned on. Let's try to replug the battery and see what happens when 3 devices are connected at the same time. Now again, the camera is running on the internal power, the fan has no internal battery, so it's disconnected, and the light has no internal battery because I removed it, so it's also disconnected. I plugged in the battery, the camera is running, the fan has power, so I connected it. However, the light has no power. And again, this is another issue with this plate. Whenever a device is connected to USB-A port and the battery is being plugged in or replugged, not all ports come on at the same time. So right now, to get the USB-A port to run, I have to replug it again. And of course, when I replug something, all devices disconnect. So again, if something doesn't have an internal battery and you replug something, it's going to stop working. Keep this in mind if you're powering your camera using a dummy battery connected to a USB port. Alright, we have all the devices running at the same time. Let's try the same tests, but using the power button. If we press the power button once, it's going to show us the battery level in case your battery does not support that. If we hold the power button, the whole battery plate will turn off. So now the battery plate turned off correctly, the camera is running on its internal battery power, and both the fan and the light are turned off. Let's turn the battery plate back on again by holding the power button. And again we have the same issue as before, only one port came on. Neither the camera nor the light have power. To get these devices to work again, we have to replug something. Let's replug the light. Now I replug the light can be turned on, the fan stopped, but I can turn it back on again. The camera still has no power. Let's replug the camera. Now the camera has power, the fan has power, but it stopped, so let's turn it on. The light has power and it was turned on, so it's working. As you can see, when using 3 ports at the same time, this plate is quite infuriating, and in that case I'm not sure I would recommend this. So the only useful scenario if you're using the 2 USB-C out ports. I think the last scenario that we can try is having those 2 devices connected to USB-C out ports and turning the battery plate on and off using the power button. So now both the camera and the fan are powered. Let's try the power button again. Alright, both devices have correctly turned off. Let's turn them back on again. And both devices can be turned on. Again, when only 2 devices are connected to the USB-C ports, everything seems to be working correctly. Let's try removing and replugging the battery for safe measure. And again, everything seems to be working correctly with just 2 devices connected to USB-C ports. Let's wrap this up. The battery plate works, and I'm putting works in quite large air quotes. My idea for getting this battery plate was to power 3 devices at the same time using the USB ports, and as I hopefully demonstrated, this is nigh impossible to do. Even when you get it to work, it's quite infuriating. The whole point of having a distribution plate, be it an NP-F plate or a V-mount power distribution plate, is to have all the devices plugged into that plate all the time and only switching the battery. If I have to constantly double check which device has power and replug that device and then replug something else because now it loses power when some port is replugged, this defeats the whole purpose of the plate. Well, luckily this plate still works when only 2 devices are connected. I will continue using it, but I'm not sure I would recommend it to anybody. You need to understand what you're getting yourself into. And of course the power savings behavior when something is not drawing enough power is something else to keep in mind. Again, I haven't tested the DC out port because that was not why I got this battery plate to begin with, and there are much better battery plates with multiple DC out or DTAP ports available. The battery plate can charge the attached battery using the USB-C PD in and out port. And to wrap it up, the happy path for the Ulanzi NP-F mounting plate model PA03 is having 2 devices connected to the USB-C ports and plugging the battery after that. And as soon as the battery is connected, turning on all the devices. Otherwise the power savings will kick in and the ports will be disabled. I probably missed something. If you have some thoughts, share them in the comments, and see you in the next one.